to our joint meeting of the Blackstone Board of Selectmen Finance Committee, Millville Board of Selectmen Finance Committee, and Blackstone Millville Regional School District School Committee. If you would mind joining me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and welcome. I think most people probably know most people at this point, but we'll work our way around with introductions. I am Jane Reggio from Millville and the chairman of the school committee.
Sarah Williams, Blackstone School Committee.
Tammy Lemieux, Blackstone School Committee.
Karen Vernon, Millville School Committee.
Jack Keefe, School Committee.
Margot Dick, Blackstone Board of Selectmen.
Dan Keys, Town Administrator, Blackstone.
Dan Keefe, Board of Selectmen, Blackstone.
Joe Raposa, Board of Selectmen, Millville.
Ken Tubman, Finance Committee, Millville.
Gary Gill, Finance Committee, Millville. And Aubrey Bono asked me to tell everyone she's on her way. So she's the chairman for our Finance Committee as well. She'll be here in a few minutes.
Okay.
Erica Blake, Blackstone Board of Selectmen, Millville.
Adrienne Pettit, Finance Committee, Millville.
Tara Larkin, School Committee, Millville.
Erin Panaco, School Committee, Millville.
Jason DeFalco, Superintendent.
Matt Aaronworth, Assistant Superintendent.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening, and we said that we would share with you where we are in our budget process, in order to do so, I will turn the meeting over to Dr. DeFalco.
So good evening, everybody. Nice to see all of you. Thank you for being here. As you know, we have been very committed to a very open dialogue during this whole budget process, trying to do a few things through this work. First, set the priorities. Second, within those priorities, set urgent needs, if you will, and using our data that we have from all kind of facets, from graduation to student performance data, student growth data, and everything in between, to help us set those kind of urgent needs that we have before you this evening, which we'll talk about momentarily. And then with that, to really try to get a fiscal plan that will match the improvement work that we're doing around our district improvement strategy. So if you look at your PowerPoint, you'll see the first slide, and they are back to back, so it's the back of the first page is our district improvement strategy, which many have commented looks like a fidget spinner, but that's fine, I'll take it. And so we, of course, in the district are working relentlessly around developing and fixing our curriculum and instructional resources, creating an instructional framework, which is really looking at how we teach and how our kids are learning, really developing the whole child and not just the academic aspect of this work, and then, of course, bringing the two communities together. So tonight we're going to actually talk about what does all of this mean in regards to our budget and how our budget is aligned to essentially these four pillars of our improvement strategy. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the why. I think this is really important for our community to really have a good understanding of, and I know that some of these data points we have talked about before this evening, but these are, when I talk about setting urgent needs and when I talk about laying out the priorities that are before us on our FY20 budget, these are kind of a chunk of the data points that we're using to really help us set those needs. So the Department of Education ranks all districts based on their ability to meet their goals, academic goals that are set out before them or before us by the commissioner and his team. And as of last spring, Blackstone Millville met 59% of the goals that were set out before them. And so we know that there is a significant amount of work to be done. Anytime we meet 59% of anything, and of course when we think about it from a teaching and learning perspective, we think about it with our students or our own children at home, 59 is not quite a D minus. So I say that just to really underscore the fact that we do need a very tight district strategy to help address this. And the data that follows are some of the reasons why we are ranked at meeting 59% of our targets and goals. Our grade 3 reading levels, which we know is really a threshold grade for us in terms of literacy as a parent. 8 is too late. Your child needs to be reading on grade level by 3rd grade, period, the end. Otherwise, they're going to spend a significant amount of time trying to catch up and make up ground. 42% of our 3rd graders are reading on grade level. So that's not quite half. So not quite half of our children. Again, this is based on last year's spring MCAS exam, which is the state benchmark for testing. So 42% of our kids are on grade level. Our percentiles for our grades. This is very important to understand. So our schools in BMR are put in the same bucket with all the other grades 3 through 8 tested grades across the state. Next year, our high school will be included in this, but they're shifting their test this year. When Millville Elementary is put into that bucket with all grades across the state, testing 3 through 8, they are in the 25th percentile. That means they are being outperformed by 75% of schools across the Commonwealth. The AFM school, you'll notice JFK is not in here. It's because they don't have any tested grades. Although those grades, K, 1, and 2, are the foundation for that 3, 4, and 5, of course. They're in the 41st percentile. So they are performing from a percentile perspective a bit higher. You'll see our middle school is performing in the 25th percentile. Again, being outperformed by 75% of the schools across the Commonwealth. And our high school, BMR High School, is in the 36th percentile of just high schools. So the high school is in a separate category, although I will tell you next year it will be reported in the same bucket as everybody else. The Department of Education has recalibrated the tests, and so a 500 in ELA as a score and a 500 in math as a score, grades 3 through 10, it's all the same, the way the tests have been calibrated. So all the percentile rankings will all be actually put into one bucket, if you will. Our most recent piece of data, and I would argue is equally as concerning as the grade 3 reading data, is our graduation rate. For the first time, we are under 90%. That's last year's graduation data. We were at 87% of our kids graduated on time. That's concerning. That is very concerning. Our graduation rate the year prior was 92.5%. Before that, it was 94. Before that, it was 96. So you're seeing over time a trend of our graduation rate getting lower and lower. The dropout rate is at 2.2%. It's about 10 kids. And the last set of data that I wanted to share with you is our student growth percentiles. And so this is the average of grades 3 through 8 and how the kids are growing from one year to the next. And ELA, they're in the 42nd percentile. So this means that students across the Commonwealth in grades 3 through 8, approximately 58% of kids are outgrowing our students from year to year. And in math, it's 49, so about 51%. So math is closer to that threshold of 50, which is average, of course. And I will explain why I think that is in a minute. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to understand the difference between the graduation rate and the dropout rate.
Yes.
So is it just that there are children that take 5 years to graduate, or they have to do summer programs in order to
Yes,
get? Okay.
that's exactly what it is. And so there are two ways that our graduation rate is calibrated. Actually there's 4, but there's kind of 2 main ways. It's what's called a cohort, and then there is an adjusted and an unadjusted. The unadjusted is a cohort. So that means all of the kids that came in as freshmen, all 100 of them, how many of those 100 kids graduated in 4 years? So for us, that number is 91%.
Okay.
This is the 4-year graduation rate with everybody included. The cohort rate is not the rate in which we're measured against. It's the actual unadjusted.
Okay.
So those are kids that came into the high school during those 4 years, but didn't start with our freshmen. They may have come their sophomore, junior, or senior year. Does that make sense? There's just a couple of ways to look at it. What we are seeing statewide is a trend, which I think is concerning at a whole nother level. It is taking kids more than 4 years to graduate. Our 5-year graduation rate across the state has increased to the highest it's ever been. We have a lot of thinking and a lot of talking to do about why is that. But I will tell you, our trend in BMR is the same. The 4-year rate dropped, the 5-year rate went up. So it is taking kids longer to get through high school.
What is the state graduation rate right now?
I will have to double check that. It just dropped for the first time. So it is right around I believe it's somewhere between 85 and 86%, but I can get the exact number. Yeah, this data was just released on Friday of last week. But I think for us locally, having a number under 90% is really concerning. We've never seen a drop like that. We're down 5%.
And do you have anything that supports the reasons why the graduation rate is dropping? Like, is it delinquencies in terms of not attending, or?
Yeah, so the high school team and I have actually just started meeting on this particular number. We have monthly standing meetings, or we call it a student indicator meeting, where we actually look at academics, behavior, and attendance for every single student, and we go case by case. We are pulling, I've asked to pull last year's, I don't know the kids who graduated, obviously, so we are going through those kids one at a time to find out exactly what happened. How many kids are still enrolled, how many kids dropped, how many kids moved, where they went, are they still enrolled, where they went to Bellingham or Uxbridge, or maybe they left the area altogether. So we are actually going to be tracking that student by student to really discern what's happening. 87.8% is a state graduation. Thank you.
So I guess my point is that's not really indicative of a budget need, more so maybe a systematic need across the state, right? I would think.
Well, we'll actually get into that, because you'll see that in our budget, we actually outline why we need what we need. And as we go through that, you will see there are some very fundamental components to our teaching and learning program that are missing. And year over year, those things compound, and you end up with students that don't necessarily have the skills they need to move forward. So I wouldn't say it's all budget, but I would say that is absolutely a part of it. Any other questions or thoughts on that? So I wanted to paint a little bit of the picture around the why. So why is it necessary that we outline the budget that we have, but more importantly, why is it that we outline the strategy for district improvement that we have, which is focused on the curriculum, the instruction, the whole child, and our communities. And so we're going to talk just a little bit about our budget process to date. As I mentioned, this has been a very lengthy process, and will remain to be as we go through the spring. And should forecast for you, the numbers we're looking at tonight are still a work in progress. You'll notice that where we started at our last meeting on January 16th to where we are now, the numbers have changed significantly. And we are still working very hard with our cost center managers, our principals and directors, and the school committee to continue to get those numbers down to something that will help us implement the improvement strategy that we need, but do it in a manner that our communities can work with. We certainly understand that. And so with that, the process that we've used to date, we've started by realigning our existing resources. So we've looked at 3 major departments within the school department, starting with our central office and eliminating 2 positions within our central office, our special education department, and restructuring and realigning our team chairs and the administrative support. If you had an opportunity to watch any of our school committee meetings, you will notice that our students with special needs, there is a significant gap between how those students are performing and the aggregate, which is all kids together. So when we talk about an achievement gap, we have a significant gap between the students that are designated as students with special needs and your general ed student, and the math and literacy scores between that. I should also mention, very concerning, our graduation rate for our students with special needs is 75%, as compared to the 87% that we just looked at. So again, when we talk about gaps and we talk about what is the skill set it takes our students to be able to graduate on time with the skills necessary to enter into post-secondary education or career development. If you are designated as a student with special needs in our district, your likelihood of graduating on time is significantly reduced as compared to a general ed student.
What, just, sorry.
Probably gonna
but
ask the same question.
Again, just to help us give context to these numbers, it's the same question. What is the state average for special needs graduation rate?
72.4%.
Okay.
So we're.
So a little bit over.
We're higher.
3%. 3% higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, I guess just to draw and I know we're going to get into some of the numbers and how this supports our initiatives here, but just to draw the conclusion, if we're a little bit higher on the special needs as compared to the state average, and we're right in line with the state average for regular graduation rate, then it sort of questions, is this really a budget issue or is it a systematic issue again?
Sure. And I would argue the special ed piece is probably both. I think the perspective that we need to look at this from is imagine your child is the one that's in the 25% that doesn't graduate.
Exactly.
Put yourself in those shoes, right? And so when you look at it from that perspective, we've got a lot of work to do. And it isn't just budget, I want to be clear. There is a programmatic piece, but behind the programs, the interventions, the supports, is the actual fiscal piece to support that and to make sure that that's in place.
And the regular education rate is about a percentage under the state average. And the true question would be, is the average what we're aiming for our kids?
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting, again, we have different demographics from other school systems.
Sure.
There may be urban school systems that have more challenging demographics. I'm not suggesting we should be at the averages, but it certainly helps to put those things in context.
Well, and to help with so when you look at the grade 3 literacy rate, so in the Blackstone Valley area, Worcester County, when you actually rank third grade reading scores, we are second from the bottom, second only to Southbridge, that's in receivership. They're at 22%. Now, while that's a large gap, right, they're 22% of students reading on grade level versus our 42%. That's a 20% gap, that's significant. We are second from the bottom. So I bring this to you for no other reason than to show the urgency that we're approaching this work with. So as we've gone through this, we have looked at all of our major departments to try and identify efficiencies. In addition to special education, we also have reorganized the complex, the JFK AFM complex, and have eliminated the two principals. We are moving forward with a model that has one principal and one assistant. And we will also have one admin assistant support person. So as we've been working through this budget process, more so on the front end, we've been looking for cost efficiencies to see how can we better realign the resources we have with our improvement strategy, because we know it's better to look at how we're spending our money first before we do anything else to make sure we're putting it where it needs to be. From there, we've built what we refer to as a zero-based budget with our principals and directors. And at our last meeting on January 16th, folks had an opportunity to look at those three different levels. We looked at what we called a level funded, which would mean if we had the exact same budget we have this year, what would that look like for services? And that would mean an automatic $750,000 cut to the cuts that were made last year. If we looked at level funded, which meant we just funded the exact same program at next year's cost, what that number would look like, and we actually have that for you this evening. And then we had something called that zero-based budget. And that zero-based budget had everything in it. So everything that our cost center managers, our principals and directors said, look, if we could redesign this building from the ground up, here's actually what we need. And that number came in at $26.9 million, which we understood very much so, and we said very clearly, right out in front of the first meeting that we had with everybody in January, that was not the number we were asking for. And we wanted to make sure that both communities heard that loud and clear. But we did want to show folks, what does that look like in terms of if we had every single thing we needed in place and what that would the cost of that would be. From that, we have spent actually at this point, over 30 hours, going line by line. God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you.
And we have looked at every single position. We've looked at glue sticks. We've looked at paper clips. We've looked at reams of paper. We have looked at transportation. We've looked at healthcare. We have gone through this, but 146 pages of detail, hours upon hours upon hours, to bring that number down to something more reasonable that still would allow us to implement the improvement strategy as we have it. And so you may be wondering, well, what does that get us? And so before we get into the numbers, I want folks to understand what's actually in that budget. And I won't sit here and, of course, I won't read these things to you, but to give you a sense, this actually will establish a line in our budget that will ensure curriculum development every single year. The curriculum is the backbone of what we teach. We need to put significant attention to that. We're doing science this year. Next year, we need to do literacy. That, to me and to our teachers and our principals and the support team, the literacy issue in BMR is very, very urgent, as we just looked at with our grade 3 numbers. And so we need to make sure we have a line in our budget every year that is focused on revising and refining the core of what we do. We also need to make sure that we have the right intervention materials in the hands of our kids. So there's a good question about, well, is that really connected to budget or not? So when I was saying it kind of is programmatic and it is somewhat budget, because if we don't have the intervention materials built into the budget, which is the case now, the teachers don't have them. So they pull things from online that they find. There's a couple of websites they go to that they pay for their own stuff to get lessons and activities on particular skill gaps that our kids have. So trying to close gaps or making inferences, or drawing conclusions or context clues. They're going online and they're paying for materials and resources that they're buying from other websites. They shouldn't have to do that. There are intervention programs that marry core curricula that will actually provide the intervention and the resources. It's built into the materials for the teachers and kids.
And I would imagine that would drive consistency across the curriculum as well versus teachers just finding websites, right?
I had a conversation at a parent forum, I think it was in November at the Blackstone Library, and a father said to me, I have 2 fifth graders. Why is it they come home with different homework? Why do they have different assignments? One of them is doing a project, the other one's not. I don't know. He said they're in the same building. I don't understand this. But they have different teachers. Exactly to your point. And that shouldn't be.
Can I share, we were doing the principal interviews for the complex, and one of the candidates, as I was walking them out, pulled me aside and said, I was looking at the data and I was looking at the grade level performance data, and the district is all over the board. And he said, well, is that indicating, he said, and you have veteran teachers that are here that I also noticed have, exemplary evaluations, and they're doing a great job. So is there an issue with the curriculum or consistency or, the instruction? And I, without divulging anything, I just kind of said, you're onto something. You picked up that information just by looking at the website and seeing there is complete inconsistency across the performance in this district.
And just for the record, I said the same thing in my interview process too. I looked at the data. I said, what's going on here? How come I couldn't find a pattern or trend that showed a particular instructional focus? Or, sometimes you'll see like the literacy numbers will be up, but math is struggling a bit. Well, there's been a huge focus on literacy, right? So there's been a big influx of resources into literacy. There's been a lot of intervention done around literacy, a lot of coaching for teachers done around literacy. But when you look at our numbers, you don't see that even across classrooms at the same grade level. So we've built in essentially the systems and structures to address that. Instruction, the next prong of our improvement strategy. Again, not to get into the specifics here of all of this, but this does include the teachers we need to get the class sizes back down. So you'll notice that we need to put a teacher back at Millville. As you know, we have the mixed grade classrooms at Millville. And with this position, we actually will be able to take that second year of the mixed grade level classrooms and close that loop. so that at the end of next year, this time next year, we can really determine what we want to do next. If we can, if we want to eliminate it, if we want to do something along the same ideas but shift the grades, but we need 2 years to close that loop, and this will help us get that job done. At the complex, we need to bring 2 teachers back. At our current grade 2 and grade 4, we have classrooms of 30 kids. And, it's a lot. Going into a second grade classroom, there's 30 little bodies on the rug with their, 30 little workbooks and working with the teacher. And the teachers are doing a lot of great work. But as you can imagine, with 30 youngsters in front of you, it's really challenging. So those 2 positions, one next year would go into grade 2, and the other would also go into grade 4. And we need to restore one of the positions at the high school. So while we eliminated 2 last year, working with the principal, Mr. Dudek, and his team, we are looking at creating a master schedule that I think with the 5 sections that a teacher would essentially be instructing, we can address the needs that we need to with that. Also, a couple of really important pieces. Principals are not the only ones that lead this work. We run into a problem when that's the case. And so we need to create the formal systems and structures and opportunities for teachers to be able to develop their leadership skill set through instructional leadership teams in each one of our buildings that know this data, own this data, can speak to the data, and address it through the needs of the kids in classrooms and in their classroom, but also during intervention blocks. And so this would allow us the opportunity, the time, and the space to do that work. This is something that we are seeing, and I think back to Aubrey, back to your question with the graduation rate. I think this is another piece to it. The social, emotional, and behavioral needs that we're seeing, and it's not unique to BMR either, in terms of those general patterns and trends that we're finding. I know when I speak to my colleagues, not only in the Blackstone Valley area, but across the state, we do have opportunities to get together. The social, emotional, and behavioral development of our youth is a significant challenge. Our kids are facing a lot of similar challenges, but in different ways. And I do think that that's been kind of the unintended consequence of technology, to be frank, and not really ever having the opportunity to unplug from their smartphones and social media. But the level of anxiety, the level of depression is significant. And it's not just at our high school. But we are working now to create a system that would help us be able to equip our teachers, equip our counselors, and our school leaders with the structures that they need to identify, and then address those issues. With this, you'll also notice that a lot of, maybe in your own travelings you've seen or heard, but a lot of the clinical support services outside of the school department are overwhelmed and run a wait list. In general. So it's not enough for us to say, well, we're going to contract with Agency X and have them deal with the social emotional needs of our kids. Agency X doesn't have any room. They have a wait list, and they're already working with us in many cases, on other cases already. And so we are looking at developing a system at the secondary level in particular that will help us address those needs. Part of last year's budget cycle, and I know it was super challenging, but when that budget was finished and certified, one of the first things that we did was we put back one of the counselors at the elementary level and a counselor at the high school level, and that has been just tremendously helpful. But it isn't the end-all, be-all. We still have a lot of work that needs to happen within that space in terms of developing the programs and the models for that. So this is one of the main drivers of our improvement strategy and the budget. And the last pillar, which is the community. It's all of you and all of our friends and family members at home watching this and that are at home and are not able to tune into this. This is probably the second most important part to this whole strategy. These are our kids. And so we're coming at this process this year from a super different place. We're a team in this. There is no us without you, and there's no you without us. We are collaborating through this process. And so, when we are trying to come to a number that works, And we are absolutely open to dialogue and conversation and ideas and short-term plans and long-range plans and 2 to 3 year plans. I mean, we are open to all of those things. We didn't get in this situation overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. We get that. But if we don't come at this from a team perspective, then at the end of the day, it's the kids in our classrooms that are going to lose out. So I say this only because this was one of the main reasons that made me want to come to BMR. It was the whole piece of bringing the communities together around the schools and the kids. And so again, I don't know if you all remember this, but when I had the pleasure of addressing 600 people at the joint town meeting for the first time, you know, one of the things that I had mentioned to everybody was we're talking about two probably the most important things to parents, right? We're talking about their kids, and we're talking about our fiscal resources. And whenever you intertwine those things, emotions tend to run high. So I get that completely. And we're in this with you. I mean, I guess that's kind of the short way for me to say this. But I do think that through this process, we will address very strategically reversing the trends. And again, it's not going to happen tomorrow, and we're not expecting the resources tomorrow. I want to be super clear. But we need to start reversing those trends of the data that we looked at that opened this discussion. I think we'll also hopefully strengthen the lines of communication. I know this has afforded me the opportunity to talk with a lot of you that otherwise it wouldn't have given me that chance to, which I think has been just a benefit in itself, and I'm very grateful for. But at the end of the day, it will serve the needs better of our community. And so with that, we can get into some numbers. Just wait for Jesse's going to pull up the document on the screen, but you have in your packet the FY20 budget options, and Mr. Aaron will take us through kind of where we are, how we got here, and where we can go next.
Sure. So you have your budget document. I'm actually looking at a document that has a couple of more answers that you'll probably ask, so I have a few additional answers that you may want to jot down, which includes some percentages. And it was brought to my attention this afternoon that when you look at this, you see the top numbers. There's 3 different budgets that are being compared. The column B is the FY19 budget as it stands today. Column C is a level services budget, which is essentially taking all of the same services, faculty that we have current date, and adding increases for utilities and just the steps and lanes for teachers and the steps and lanes and a contractual increase for the Unit C personnel. I did mention that at another meeting. The modified 20 is where we currently are. So Dr. DeFalco, myself, the school committee, the cost center managers have met. As he mentioned, we've spent well over 30 hours going line by line through the zero-based budget, trying to figure where we could make changes but still support our strategic plan and provide the instruction that we are aiming to provide this coming year. So when you look at those top numbers, they may not seem familiar because you look at the FY19 number and you say, well, this says the FY19 budget is $24,037,000. I remember it being $22,062 something. So 22.63 is actually what it's about. If you subtract the grants, the circuit breaker, and if you just look, not the state aid, but if you subtract the grants, the circuit breaker, and the estimated offsets from local contribution from the user fees that I have in that blue section, you'll get a number that is $22,631,032. That's the approximate of the 22.6 that you're used to seeing, and that was what we called the quote-unquote certifiable operating budget. So we removed all of the state and the federal money that was coming in and have the towns approve just the base operating budget, which includes the state the state money that comes in, and then the assessments to the towns. If you were to look at the level service budget, which starts at the top number as 24.678 million, the equivalent certified operating budget number for that, if we remove, once again, just the grants, the circuit breaker reimbursement, and all of our offsets and user fees, you're going to get a number of $23,288,644. And that is a 2.91% increase to the FY19 budget. If you look at the modified 20 and you take away the grants and the circuit breaker and again the offsets, you're going to come to a number that is $23,963,550. And that is a 5.89% increase over the FY19 certified operating budget. Below, where you see under the pink lines on your actual sheet, I've broken down the assessments to the towns for each of the 3 budgets. I was asked to separate out the exclusionary costs. I will point out that there's a significant difference between what you see in exclusionary costs for FY19 to what you see for the 2 proposed budgets in FY20, whether it's level service or whether it's the modified budget. That is because in the past, there were a number of items that were included in the exclusionary budget. It's my understanding that the primary thing to be included in the exclusionary budget is transportation. I've put out questions to colleagues in other regional districts, and I asked them, what's supposed to exactly be included in the exclusionary budget? And their response was, well, that should be dictated in your regional agreement. Our regional agreement references nothing in our exclusionary budget. It actually even includes transportation in the operating budget. So by state mandate, I've removed the transportation costs and put them into an exclusionary section. And then all of the other costs that were associated above the minimum local contribution, I've just declared additional costs. It should be noted, though, as well, whether they're exclusionary or additional costs, both of those costs are proportionately divided by the percentage of the students in the towns. So the bottom line, when I originally showed exclusionary / additional funding, the bottom line will still be the same. It's just separated to show what the transportation costs are and then what the additional costs are.
Can I ask
You have
a
a question?
question?
Certainly.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I have the schedule, but if you go to the Department of Ed and then they have the out-of-district costs, and there's like a few line items, one of them at the very bottom is transportation. Is that transportation to out-of-district schools, or would you need the schedule to know what I'm talking about? Which I can totally get.
Out-of-district transportation is special education costs to transport kids to other district programs. Yep.
Okay, so this exclusionary transportation cost is actually sitting above the line in the in-district, one of the buckets there? Or,
I'm
sorry.
This is in-district transportation, like our busing.
No, and I can say I went back to Wen's budget book too, and her exclusionary costs included regular transportation, special education transportation, and all transportation associated with athletics and music. So this exclusionary cost is the grand total of all of our transportation costs.
Okay.
Yes.
Including special ed out of district
Including special ed out of district.
and BVT and/or
No.
BVT, that's
separate,
paid
that's
from
a
the town.
That's right, okay.
And are you going to give us that breakout between what's in the line for transportation versus anything else?
There's nothing, in my exclusionary costs, it's just transportation. I can give you a breakout of what the regular day transportation is, the special education transportation, and both the music and athletics transportation if you would like, but it is all transportation.
The minimum local contribution.
That's required of each town.
Of each town by the state.
And a formula determined by the state.
Okay, and then whatever is remaining is just
No, and
transportation?
No, it's exclusionary. So where he had 2 lines before, he now has 3. So if you look down at your
Oh,
town.
I see. I was looking at my old version. I was looking at the one I had from before. Okay,
Sorry.
I got it now. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
I was looking at an old
Based
version.
on our conversations,
Yeah,
I broke
yeah.
the
Broke that.
exclusionary out
Appreciate
for
it.
everybody. Yep. And that exclusionary cost, so that you know, that exclusionary cost is not the total of our transportation costs. So that exclusionary number is actually the total of our transportation costs minus the reimbursement that we get for transportation. So the reimbursement that the district gets for transportation directly offsets the exclusionary costs. And then the remaining cost of transportation is split between the towns because it's on the part of the towns to provide transportation to school. I also, in addition to these sheets, which I know this is the bulk of what people want to look at and see what are the bottom line numbers, we did include, I was asked for some more specificity to what these numbers actually included. I did include the modified budget also that's broken down specifically by function code. It's not the line-by-line detail that the school committee and administration has gone through, but these are the major buckets of where the funds are being applied to. And at a later point, we'll put together some graphical analysis of administrative costs versus instructional costs versus some potential trends. But these are the raw numbers in the specific areas that they are being allocated to.
Is it possible to provide the same detail with the level services too? So you'd have just like another column? So we could see where the differences would be based on level services or the modified?
Yep.
Can we go back to the additional cost line? Can you give me another definition of that? I don't know if I misunderstood it or.
So every town is given a minimum local contribution number set by the state. Your minimum local contribution number is listed. So it's 6 million for Blackstone. It's for this coming year for Blackstone, it's 6,596,125. One of the things that you will note is that, and it's very important to note, is the state has transferred a greater deal of the responsibility of education onto the towns and reduced the amount that we're getting in Chapter 70 aid. So you'll see that from last year to this year, the minimum local contribution, which is what the state is requiring Blackstone to pay, has gone up over $200,000 just in minimum local. Millville also has over $100,000 of an increase in their minimum local contribution.
And that's based right on the students that are attending this, that's based on students
Correct.
attending the school. So it's not, to be clear, it's not necessarily a decrease in state aid as much as it is a decrease in students attending Blackstone Millville Regional.
No, it's actually a shift in the formula that is trying to get the towns to a greater proportion of the foundation budget. So they have a foundation budget, and that says what we need to provide for the students to get the very basic, adequate education. And the state says, this is what we expect the towns to be able to afford, and this is the support that we're going to provide. The support that they provide comes in the form of Chapter 70 reimbursement, which is the state local aid and Chapter 71 reimbursement, which is the transportation part. They have been lowering or trying to lower the Chapter 70 portion and increase the minimum local contribution portion to get to minimum net school spending, which is shifting the responsibility, the financial responsibility onto the towns. It's not specifically based on, well, it's an increase or decrease in number of students. That does play a factor, but I can tell you that I did a 5-year trend that I looked at, and this was the greatest percentage of increase to minimum local contribution in the past 5 years, and that was not just based on enrollment. Back to the original question, I didn't want to dismiss that. So after we look at the minimum local contribution number, then there's the exclusionary costs, which is the transportation, and then what we're looking to get to for an operating budget, which is, as I mentioned, the net operating budgets that we're looking at being those $23,288,644 or the $23,963,550. I know you don't see that on your page. Those are the couple of the numbers I threw out. The additional is whatever is left between your minimum local contribution, your exclusionary costs that you're required to pay for transportation, and the target we're trying to meet for the whole budget.
What is the percentage for Blackstone versus Millville students right now?
Do you have that? 72. I have it. Hold on one second. It is, I think it's
72.
Hold on.
What?
I just need to pull it out of the spreadsheet if you just give me 1 second.
And I know we don't update that every year,
It's
correct?
October.
Every year, October 10th.
Did we talk about maybe
so
not
Blackstone,
updating
we update it annually, so I apologize for the delay. I just needed to
no
click on
worries.
the right cell. So Blackstone is at 72.48%,
Okay.
and Millville is at 27.52%, and I hope those add up to 100.
They look like they do.
Okay.
Do we know on the state level, there's a lot of conversation about the reimbursement rate on regional transportation, and I know they were looking at increasing it. Have we heard anything? Has there been any shift or movements on the state level as far as that transportation?
So as of right now, we were told that the governor's original budget has been put out at 76%.
Not the 80.
Which is not the 80 or 100, which we've been asking. If you actually look at the number is not 76% exactly. It's slightly less. It's slightly less than that. And there are legislators that are really pushing and saying that they're going to be trying to wave that banner for us and get up to 100%. They're also, and again, this is an interesting year. I've mentioned this at the school committee meetings. The foundation formula is in flux. So this first formula that the governor is using has shifted some of the responsibility to minimum local contribution and off of the Chapter 70 aid. It's very possible that there are other iterations through the Senate that will say we need to shift some responsibility back off. So those minimum local contribution numbers in the next iterations of the budget, they may change.
What did you use in the budget?
This budget is based on the specific numbers that we got from the governor's budget.
So this was just not trying to beat a dead horse, just trying to sure I understand, because I did watch all the videos talking about this previously, starting in January, talking about the cherry sheets, talking about Chapter 70, and I thought I recalled hearing a nominal increase, something to the effect of $60,000, $20 per student.
$20 per student.
Right.
Was,
that was projected in the initial cherry sheet number.
And
for
that is
Chapter
that
70.
is exactly what you're seeing here. But that also, so in addition to the Chapter 70 aid that we receive, if you look at the cherry sheet, so the cherry sheet contains the Chapter 70 aid, it contains your Chapter 71 transportation reimbursement, then it contains your charter school tuition reimbursement, and it contains your school choice reimbursement for students that are coming to your schools. And then on the bottom of the cherry sheet, it offsets those revenues with additional expenses. And currently, we have approximately a $300-something thousand net loss to the school choice, and there's over close to 100,000 in charter school. So that all gets adjusted. If you look at the top number on your sheet, the state aid, the actual state aid number from FY19 to FY20 has decreased. So that's based on the small increase that they gave us, which is the $20 per student, but then our school choice numbers went up, and they increased the amount that they're reimbursing charter schools, so that got thrown off also, and we end up with a larger net loss in that area.
And I gave you this.
I have, yeah, we have it. Yeah.
And can I just chime in? So that's back to the other question about you can't necessarily correlate the dollars to the outcome. There's a great example of how you can, right? So if you're choosing a restaurant and you're looking at Yelp reviews, are you going to go to the one that's average? Or are you going to go to the one that has really good reviews? Right? And when you really boil it down, it's about programs, it's about opportunities and supports for kids. And so when you run a system on just above average or just below average, we get, average outcomes. Families can vote with their feet and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to ask about the charter school. So are the regional charter schools in this budget versus the regional vocational school? Like, just I know Franklin Charter just opened up two new classrooms for every grade, right? And so is that going to be affecting this budget if there are more students that are attending the charter school next year?
Absolutely.
What's the net loss for a student on the reimbursement, just out of curiosity?
The net loss per student for the charter school is whatever our per pupil expenditure is. I don't have that number offhand for this next coming year, but so school choice is different. School choice is a set amount per student across the state, but whatever the per pupil expenditure is for the district, if that kid goes to a charter school, that amount gets removed and sent to the charter school.
But what is the reimbursement then, I guess?
So the reimbursement is what the sending school receives, and they changed the formula for that. So in order to help offset the impact of kids leaving, the state has a formula where, and I apologize because they just changed it again. But it's like they send you 100% of the amount that you would be receiving for the student in the first year, and then it drops to 50% for the next 3 years, and then they stop giving you anything.
So, I'm sorry, I just want to, and I'm trying to just think of it broadly. So if, let's just say our cost is around $14,000 per student after you calculate the budget based on the Department of Ed, right? So we send $14,000 to the charter school, and then the state says, well, our state aid for that student is $10,000, so we'll reimburse you $10,000 year one, and then year two we're only going to give you $5,000.
Well, here's what happens. They say that they're going to. It's similar to the regional transportation situation, where it's supposed to be 100% reimbursement the first year, 50% the second, and 50% the third. And that reimbursement also comes out of Chapter 71. So it's one pot. And as that pot diminishes, that's how they figure out the percentages of what they're going to be able to reimburse the percentage for the transportation, and then what the percentage will be for the charter school reimbursements.
And if I can just add to that, so if one would assume, well, if we're educating 200, just use a round number, 200 less kids, that's fine, right? We'll just cut some overhead. Well, you can't, because they didn't take one full classroom from Millville or from Blackstone. They took 4 kids from first grade. They took 3 kids from second grade. They took 11 kids across 2 schools from third grade. You see? And so, as you go over time, there is zero overhead that we can reduce but our per pupil and reimbursement rate is reduced. So it's not like we can even reduce costs from that perspective on the big ticket items, transportation, classroom teachers.
Do we have demographics on the students both leaving our district through school choice, which schools are going to, the numbers?
Yes.
And then likewise, which schools are opting into our district, and
yes,
that information is available?
We do. As a matter of fact, in my entry plan report that was put on our webpage at the, good grief, January school committee meeting or February, all the data's in there. You'll see it is 17 pages of data about our district. And so it has all of the per pupil expenditure numbers. It has all of the school choice in, school choice, out. All of those are laid out.
And is there any way to understand why specifically those kids are leaving?
Yeah. So we talk to parents, and we have not put a formal exit survey in place yet. We are going to do that. But when you talk to parents informally, it's opportunity based. They just want different programs. They want their kids to have opportunities to try different things that we don't offer here.
But so is that being addressed in these budgets?
Yes.
So the types of programs that parents are saying, I really want my child to experience are within the modified 20 budget?
Yes, and even in addition to that, we are doing work outside of the budget to try to get some of these things in place now. So the superintendent group at the Blackstone Valley Consortium, there's like 10 of us, we're looking at expanding career pathways among our high schools. So we have 420 kids. I can't put 10 pathways in place, but we can put one or two. Uxbridge has one or two. Bellingham has one or two. Douglas, et cetera, and then we can actually offer them to each other without taking each other's kids and money, like per pupil expenditures. So we're looking at some creative ways through that. We're also working with we will be notified soon of a project we're trying to do for grades 2 and 3 literacy that will essentially put in the hands of our kids access to thousands and thousands of online texts at their reading level with the device they need in order to be able to do that at home and to do that in the classroom at no cost to the district. We're trying to do this through a third party. So we're looking for other opportunities to use better what we have also in the region to do that, but then also to go after grant opportunities to fund some of these projects.
Can I ask another question? Sorry. In terms of, and you said you were kind of open, and I guess maybe I've kind of gone through this, but what about like charging for kindergarten? Like, why do other schools, like, I know we can't charge for transportation because of Chapter 71. Is that the same for like full day kindergarten, or has the committee just made a decision that based on, whatever your philosophy is, that you don't want to do that? Because other districts do, right? So
the trend is trying your best to get away from that.
Everyone is trying to get away. I can speak personally that in Wachusett it's a huge issue where we're trying to implement free full day kindergarten. I can also say that I don't know the specifics of the history, but depending upon when districts implemented free full day kindergarten, there were grants allocated to those districts, and there were certain sustainability programs that needed to be put into place. So that could have potential impact. I know some of you have the cherry sheet, but the questions came up. So to your $20 per student, our Chapter 70 aid for 2019 was $10,932,919 before any reductions. And for the 2020 governor's budget, it went up $35,000. So that's really impressive. For the school, for the charter school reimbursement, we don't have a tremendous amount of students in charter schools. We're getting a charter school tuition reimbursement this year estimated at $46,809. And our charter school sending tuition is $109,107. And for school choice specifically, we will be receiving, it's an estimated receipt right now, $234,721 school choice receiving, and we will be paying $603,306 in school choice sending tuition.
Those are the kids we need to keep.
Yeah.
And we can't keep them if we don't have the, programs and opportunities for them. And not to say that we don't have any programs and opportunities, but we need to expand upon
We
what
need to
have.
build.
I know this is a small piece, but a few years ago, we did talk about charging for kindergarten, and school choice was one of the reasons we didn't. We felt we would lose kids at that age, and they'd be gone forever.
Oh, yeah.
So if they don't start here, we actually, a few years before that, had changed our birth date requirement for kindergarten, and we're hoping to gain a few, because there were a few towns that were scattered from us. So the parents that had the September 10th birthday that wanted their we only changed it to September 1st. I think we were at August
15th.
15th.
Yeah.
Prior to that, and we were losing kids because they were school choicing
Into a September 1st school.
to a September 1st or so. Charging for kindergarten after our grants were done, there were years that we could not charge because of the grants. It just became it would have been a loss. We would have lost, we would have lost those kids earlier. So it was discussed.
It's hard to
Thanks
get
for
them
the
back when they
history.
leave.
It
too,
is.
And I think the other thing with the kindergarten having to pay is the concern that we widen the gap in the socioeconomic category. So you sort of have your haves that can go to preschool for 3 years and then go to a paid kindergarten full day, and you have your have-nots that are probably not paying for preschool and then not getting that full year of kindergarten. And, Common Core first grade standards are that you can write 6 paragraphs, and they have no instruction up to then. So I think that would be the other concern from the teaching standpoint, is how do they get to that standard, and then they're even further behind than what they would be now.
I'll throw out a number to match that. The low-income, economically disadvantaged graduation rate is 77.4%. So speaks exactly to Tammy's point of, the larger we make the gap for people to be able to attend school and get the education that they need, the more we're going to end up suffering in the end.
But I mean, to be fair, and not that I'm advocating this, but just, again, in the interest of fairness, public support could be provided for low-income families, just as is done for transportation expenses that some of the non-regional schools charge for their high school students and the like. So those kind of differences could have been offset by looking at, just like we offer school lunches and everything else, right? So.
Can you say more about that? I want to.
Well, Bellingham, for example, is it Bellingham? I was trying to remember when I was looking at this. They, once you get to high school, you have to pay to be picked up by a bus. Now, my understanding is we're a regional school system; we can't do that. But they have that. But I believe there's also income support, things like that. So I would imagine that the same could have been applied to. Again, it's beside the point, but it's not. I doubt that any of these are such like black and white, do or don't kind of.
Thank you for that clarity.
There are some parents that just don't want their kids away for the full
Oh,
day
yeah.
of kindergarten. I don't know who they are, but it's not me. I was psyched free full day kindergarten.
Can we, so just really quickly, so I mean, obviously, first of all, I just want to say thank you. I know that you guys have been meeting certainly with our finance committee, with the local representative, the local senator, presumably with the Blackstone folks as well. And I think that, I haven't been in those meetings, but the feedback that I've gotten has been really great. So I feel like you guys are bending over backwards to involve us in the process and educate us about kind of everything that you're doing. So I think that's great. So when we push back on stuff, in a lot of cases, it's lack of knowledge and just, trying to ask questions.
No, we appreciate the questions.
Yeah, so certainly, and you've mentioned the percentile increases for the 2 budgets, and, they make sense. And certainly, I think the reason for some of these questions was trying to understand what's changing in terms of the funds coming in, because obviously when we go down and look at, to some level, what the folks on the finance committees from 2 towns care about is what's the increase to our towns, right? And so, it ends up being, roughly 5% for Blackstone, slightly higher for Millville. The minimum contribution percentage looks like it's changed, and just over 10% for the modified 20 budget to Blackstone and about 11% to Millville. So as we look at that number, obviously, and you know this, and I'm just stating it for so the people, anyone who's watching
I
can
had
understand.
those numbers written down here for when people asked.
Yeah,
It's-
okay.
It's 5.09% for Blackstone for the level services. It is 10.53% for Blackstone for the modified 20. And as you mentioned, it's 5.36% for Millville for the level services and 11.36% for Millville for the modified services.
Yeah, so I rounded, but we get the same numbers.
Excellent. I'm
so-
glad you're keeping my math in check.
But anyways,
You
I
still
just-
hit 100% on the proportion of the kids, which is good.
So again, I'm just saying it for, people's benefit that are looking, that as we look to these, and the requests all nominally seem reasonable, but this, these kind of numbers still represent challenges, of course, to us.
We recognize that.
And we're still working.
We are.
We're still working.
Yeah, I mean, these numbers have changed since the last time I saw them, certainly, so
Yeah.
I recognize that as well.
Still working.
So I have a question, and I apologize for being late. On this final number doesn't match the final number here. For the total budget, modified budget, there's like a $9,000 difference. I don't know if it's, is
I
it
may
just,
not have made an adjustment somewhere.
okay.
I would apologize.
No, it's just fine, I just.
They're still working. He probably printed this
Let's
out.
pick the lower, the 9,000.
Where did that?
7% of 9,000, I'm thinking.
Sold.
No, and I realize.
Well, this is what happens. This is what happens. I have multiple documents, and then we literally are changing these numbers day by day.
Right.
We're meeting hourly, just as we come up with
Could have
ideas
been
where
a
we could
simple
share.
service agreement that you adjusted and it just,
Yeah.
everything's not tied together. So I just for clarification for us going forward. Oh, gee.
So what is the drop dead date for you guys putting down your pencils and saying we're done on the budget number?
When is your hearing? When is
So
your
our hearing is next
certification?
Wednesday.
Your hearing
Our
is next
public-
Wednesday, but your certification of the
Correct.
budget is,
Is 12 days after?
has to be so many days before town meeting.
Our next meeting? Yeah, it has to be so many days before.
We're going to do it at the next meeting.
Not having a meeting.
I think we had to modify that, that date due to our change in our meeting schedule. Because it has to be so many days prior to the first town meeting.
Mhm.
So I don't remember if we counted that.
I think it's our last meeting in March.
27.
27th is that last meeting,
I
yeah.
believe so.
So we changed that to a meeting, not a workshop?
We can
Yeah.
certify budgets at a workshop. We can-
Workshops are meetings.
They are meetings, exactly.
There's no difference on the state level.
As long as it's on the agenda.
There isn't, so.
As long as it's on the agenda, we can have action items.
And I know that was a trick
So,
question
the end of
because we
March?
know that pencils go down and pencils come up, and pencils
Right.
go down and pencils come up.
I was waiting for him to say that.
So what we are hoping to avoid in this process is the process we've had in the last few years where we adopt a budget, recertify a budget, go to one town meeting, recertify a budget, go to a second town meeting, recertify a budget, and have to have the first town meeting meet again for the second time. We really would like to get to a number not only that the towns understand, but the community understands. They can understand that bottom line. They can know what those services will be provided, what their class sizes will be, well, not exactly, 'cause you never know that, but, till they walk in the front door. But, what the picture looks like as opposed to going into July or August or whatever. So we would like to use that end of March to have a budget that we will go forward to your finance committee meetings when we present, that we'll present at both towns, that we'll present to the public. So really the end of March is kind of where we want to have a finalized number.
Yeah, because we meet with you on the 26th.
26th. Yep.
Yep.
I guess just feedback on that, if that's truly your goal. I mean, I'll just be completely straightforward and honest, and I've shared this before. That modified 20 line for Millville anyway, I think is a big stretch. So the higher we are, the more likely it is that we are going to have to go back and forth with the number, just based on our circumstances. So if that's helpful to you at all, I mean, it's just the reality of it. If that's your number, it's very unlikely that we're going to end up in a situation where you certify a budget that doesn't have to go back and forth a few times.
So I want to just share, and you know, by any means, everybody just chime in on this, but we were really serious about our commitment to to both towns to have a working number for our conversation tonight. And so, like we said, we put a lot into getting it here, and we're still committed to continue to work. What we're looking at now, after speaking with both communities, is what would kind of for lack of a better term, but kind of like a phased-in model look like over the series of a few years. So, so we know we can't do everything all at once, but what, we know that the 24.6 at level service is just running what we have now. It's literally exactly what we have today as we sit in these seats, and we know that will not allow us to implement our improvement strategy. But looking at the improvement strategy, what can we do now? What can we do next? What can we do later? And trying to phase that in a way that the communities can afford, I think is exactly what we're trying to do and what we're committed to do.
And we certainly get that these numbers are a very large percentage increase when you just look at it from a community perspective. When you just look at the bottom line for that community, we get 10.53%, 11.36 is huge, and it is significant. But the more you cut, if you cut $200,000 off of Millville's bottom line, you've got to cut $1.5 million off of the budget. And $1.5 million is a significant impact. And if you go with just minimum contributions, we're at a decreased budget over last year. So it's not even level services, it's not even level funded. So somewhere we have to work with the communities, but we have to balance that out in what the district needs. And so somehow there's got to be the happy medium somewhere in there.
So based on what you're telling us here, obviously you're going to go back, sharpen the pencil. Are you looking at both level services and modified 20 to sharpen your pencil on, or is that not even something you'll look at for level services?
So the level service work is embedded in the modified. The modified is the level service and the additional resources we need to do the, to implement our improvement strategy. So what we have been doing is looking at to say, okay, well, if we can't, we'll use a perfect example. We wanted $5,000 for each school's leveled library for our literacy program, right? So if you're studying mysteries in 3rd grade, and you need to make sure that you've got 6 different reading levels in your class, that those kids can all read a mystery text on their grade level, right? On their reading level rather. It's called the Lexile level. So we put $5,000 into each school for those leveled libraries, part of our literacy work. So we've already looked to say, well, maybe we cut that $5,000 to $2,500. Yeah. So what would it look like if we scaled back those books to $2,500? And so the next question is, well, if we can't do the $2,500 for the leveled libraries for our literacy program, maybe we put that on pause until the literacy work and the rewriting of the curriculum is done next year, and we purchase it all together. The problem is those kids won't have those resources next year, and that 3rd grade kid never gets that year back. So I just shared that as an example of what we're wrestling with.
Let me rephrase. Are you asking us, are we looking at adjusting level? So we have done that when we've done our reorganizations, and so our level services does bring in some of our changes because we have changed alternate things in there already.
I guess my bottom line question is that 5.4% to Millville? Do you think that's going to be the minimum you'll be asking for Millville based on these 2 columns?
Or is it on?
Okay, that's what my question
was.
The
restructuring, all of the reorganizations that we currently put into the level service were cost savings. So technically, it's not even level service. It's just,
Funding money.
it's,
Right.
there's no new.
I'm just
there's
looking
no
for
money.
planning purposes. Are we going to have any wiggle room below that at this point in time?
If we were charged with coming up with a number that was below that, that would mean we would need to cut services, cut programs, cut teachers.
Right, gotcha.
I'm not sure if it was asked earlier, but what is the number in the state, the E&D?
Right now, the number in E&D is, it was certified at,
I have your certified number, so nothing has been spent from the certified number? Or have you?
for this fiscal year?
Nothing. Okay, so it is, okay. And what percentage?
Can you
about
share what the
that?
number is?
It's in an email. You can share it out. I'm sorry.
Approximately, it's.
625 or something like that?
Yeah, it's 600, it's approximately 600 some odd thousand.
And the percentage is at,
It's,
because you can't go over 1.1?
we can't go over, we can't go over 5.
5.
It's
Okay.
nowhere near. We're at a little over half of what we could go to.
Like 1.2 million.
And quite honestly, while I've said that we have not spent anything from E&D this year, there certainly, as everyone knows, have been some significant capital expenditures that needed to be made based on the troubles that we've encountered in the beginning of the year. We've had some sewer issues. So that's not to say that at some point in this fiscal year.
That won't happen.
That it
Right.
won't happen.
Yeah. So just a follow-up is, I know a few years back that the school tried to have like a capital stabilization account, and it was voted down at town meetings. Is that something that you're looking at for the future? So that some of those, that E&D may be used if there's ever extra money?
Would it be recommended if we did?
It's worth discussing. I know our Voc school does it.
Yeah.
And I know that's what it was modeled after. And I know some, not recently, but in some years back, you had to spend from the E&D because it was at the higher end, and they made some good investments at that time. But I'm wondering, is there a way that we can, for those capital projects and those kind of things, if that E&D ever adjusts or changes, if it's worth looking at? I'm just throwing it out there because it was there in the past. It may be worth a discussion point.
You're saying in the past, we've had a capital
Yeah,
stabilization
we had
fund?
The school
brought it to the town
Oh,
floor.
we tried to.
The two
we tried
towns
to
have to
implement.
approve us to have an account, and it failed in Millville. when everyone
Those are
went to-
the three separate stabilizations we could do is the capital, we could do a special education stabilization and an OPEB. Traditionally, regional school districts, those are more common in town school districts. But regional school districts have that ability to have the E&D, so they kind of use that as more of a generalized pot, but it serves similar
Yeah, those one-time expenses. that-
one-time expenses, emergencies.
Well, I think with the state of our high school and the rejection from MSBA to two applications in a row, I think it's something.
Yeah.
To definitely bring up.
That is absolutely a big piece of it. And I don't know that, MSBA wants to, they invest, right, in communities and schools, and I don't know until we get all of this in order that we're going to get much out of MSBA until we get kind of our fiscal pieces straight here. So I think, they certainly don't want to, there are so many projects that are applying to be either renovated, core renovation, or new builds in terms of major construction projects, and we've been denied twice. They don't tell you why. But, my sense is they don't want to get us to the finish line and we can't cross because of our own local finances. So my sense is until we get that straight, we're going to need like a really strong plan B in terms of what to do with that, with the high school in particular. So we're back at the drawing board for that, but we haven't put in another application until we get that in place, what the plan is going to be.
Can I just make just an observation to everybody, for us in Blackstone? I would hope, as you look at the bottom line figure, please take into account what town meeting will accept. And we take that very seriously with our finance committee, and what they'll endorse along with our Board of Selectmen. So as we move forward, I know the figures that I see in front of me. I know what probably can be sold to our Finance Committee and to our Board of Selectmen and being able to sell it on town meeting floor. And I think that's important to note. I'm intrigued, though, Jason, about your wanting to put together a plan over the next few years to make sure you can get where you want to be, and whether it be 3 years or 5 years. And I think that would be able to be sold to the people, at least in Blackstone, and I'm sure in Millville, doing the same way, trying to put together some kind of a plan like that. This is a little sticker shock, I think, the modification number all of a sudden, but I think you can get there and beyond it if some kind of a plan is put together. Just my observation, not my board's or my Finance Committee, but I think it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, I would echo to the extent that you're considering taking that phased approach, if even right now for this cut, you could say, okay, we took our modified and said for next year, here it is, for the year after, here it is, and knowing that it could certainly change, but understanding that allows us for the first time, right, to have some kind of longer term budget than just the current years, and is definitely helpful for us when going to town meeting to explain to people what the vision is and, you know, what the expectations are.
Yeah, and that was something we heard, you know, from both, that we're trying to wrestle with what, again, like what does that look like for next year, and you know what can, when you, it's so hard because when you're looking at the needs of a kid sitting in front of you, it's like, you know, when you try to prioritize that, there's no real good prioritization, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's kind of where that's where the tricky part comes into that, but that's something we're definitely committed to looking at.
Just one more question for me, and then I think I'm done. What's your process for identifying grants, and what's your success rate typically? Because I noticed that from 19 to 20, we're expecting a decrease in that number, and I would have hoped to see that be increased.
Yeah. Those are entitlement grants. Yeah. So those are your Title I, Title II, Title IV. We don't get Title III. It's for English language learners. So those grants aren't. They are not private grants that we go after. These are federal or state and entitlement grants.
So are there any private grants that you go after?
Yeah, so we have 3 out right now. One we got for $50,000 to do the work around the curriculum and instructional audit with Johns Hopkins. That's a big project for us. They just actually were in the district all last week. We have another $50,000 out to do some of the instructional leadership development work we're trying to do with our principals and teachers. And we should hear definitively back, we hope, this week. It's the money's in the governor's office, so we're waiting to see what he approves. But we heard from the Department of Ed. We were doing a collaborative effort with other districts around this work, because again, we're small, so it's hard to get folks to invest in that when there's 1,800 kids, when they're used to investing in 13,000, 14,000, 15,000 kids. So we're doing some joint work with other towns on that one, and then we put out a $25,000 to support some of the literacy work. And we heard from a private party that they are very close to making a decision on that, hopefully this week too. So, it's only been a few months, 7 or 8 months or what have you, but we've gone after about $100,000 in that short period of time to fund very specific projects within this. You can't get a grant to buy like textbooks or to buy leveled readers for your classroom, or places won't fund that. They find that is a local obligation, but they will fund specific projects like that grade 2-3 literacy because it's innovative, it's different, it's tech-based. We have some folks that are super excited about trying to get a device in the hand of every one of our 2nd or 3rd graders to give them access to thousands and thousands of texts at their reading level. So, those kinds of things we can get. So we've gone after that.
I guess the question would be, again, I don't know anything about this, what opportunities are out there, but do you have a process in place? I don't know how you find out about grants, how you decide which grants to go after, who manages that? Is it an assigned function? Is it more opportunistic? How do you approach it, I guess?
So there are the smaller ones that teachers go for often. You know, they'll put something online and get something like a project funded or crowdfund. No, what is that called?
Crowdfunding.
Is it crowdfunding?
Crowdsourcing.
Donors choose. Like there's that kind of thing. But the bigger grants, the Department of Education has a web page that we check a lot, and we receive information from different groups that we work with. Hey, you should take a look at this opportunity on leadership development, or that's why the district improvement strategy is super important, because the folks that we work with, either consulting groups or the Department of Education, folks that know what our improvement strategy is, will send us stuff to make sure that we don't miss opportunities. We also get a weekly update from our commissioner that comes to myself, and his team will outline upcoming grant opportunities around literacy development. A lot of it's capacity building and staff, so we go after a lot of that. We did some work with social studies with 8th grade this year because they're changing the curriculum to civics and having a whole piece in that. So yeah, so it's...
Do you have a general idea for like last year how much was raised through grants and like what success rate you had?
Not for the small, $200, $300 stuff. We could certainly look at. I don't know what they.
Sure. I want to add too, the general consensus in the state and at the federal level is all of the grants that they put out, even the competitive ones, they're to supplement, not supplant. So whereas it seems like there are these pots of money that we might be able to access, that's true, but again, it's accessing them for specific supplemental services.
I'm just suggesting you may have some room for supplementation next year. So,
well, I mean, supplementation, getting back to your point about retaining students, supplementation is exactly that, right? So
yes.
Yeah, but like an example, so some of the work we're trying with the social emotional development work, we got a $10,000 grant to do that. And so that's paying for the support. So we are looking, but our team knows if it doesn't align with our strategy, we're not going to do it, because that's where you go off the rails, and everybody's doing 100 things and nothing gets better.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good job. Thanks, folks. Getting there.
Adjourn the meeting, motion?
Yeah. Motion to adjourn the meeting. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just stay.